Daniel Jeremiah's NFL Mock Draft 1.0 has officially been released January 20th. Disclaimer, I have taken a look at this already, so I have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. And for me, this is kind of like being a kid on Christmas, a DJ Mock Draft. We get an insight to how the league's going to view some of these players and a range of where some of these guys will probably go. And this one does have quite a few twists and turns, and I think this is probably a combination of what Daniel Jeremiah has heard versus his own individual evaluations up to this point. For me, it's tough to agree or disagree with many of these things right now. Really haven't taken any deep dive into the class, just done a brief overview so we have some familiarity. But, of course, if you're college football fans, you probably know a lot of these players. But there are some really interesting players to some interesting teams in this, so I want to kind of prepare you for that. It's his first mock draft of the year. It is January 20th. A lot's going to change throughout the offseason process with medical testing, with interviews, and then, maybe a deeper dive into the tape and athletic testing in some regards as well, especially, height, weight, length with arms and all that. So we'll see. A lot can change, but this is NFL Mock Draft 1.0. It is his first one. I'm sure a lot will change from here to draft day, so take things with a bit of a grain of salt. I know I've been doing mock drafts for 2023 for months now, but I take some more liberties. I'm not working at NFL.com, but that being said, my mock drafts have been viewed way more than DJ's up to this point, so eat shit, Jeremiah. But no, he's obviously really nice guy, came on the channel last year. Hopefully we can do that again, but we'll dive right into it. If you want a more in-depth ranking, it's at Move the Sticks on Twitter. He did more of a deep dive on some of these picks. I haven't read through those, so that is something perhaps I'll do off camera, but I would recommend checking it out if you want a more of a breakdown. But we're going to start here with Jalen Carter at number 1. So it's also important to keep in mind that this mock is not going to feature trades. There will be trades with his mock drafts as we go throughout the year, or usually that's the trend, I would say. But the first one, no trades whatsoever. So we stay here at number 1, and the Bears take Jalen Carter. So, yeah, he mentions that the Bears would probably love to trade out of this pick, but there's always got to be somebody that's looking to trade up. That might not necessarily be the case. Bryce Young, I think, is a great player, but is certainly very, very small. Height, weight, unprecedented a bit. Although I was lower on Kyler Murray for similar reasons, although Murray was definitely a bit bigger than Bryce Young was, bulk-wise. But, Murray hasn't had many problems. He's not like an elite quarterback by any means, but I think Bryce Young's great, and I think he still will go high, but the bulk is definitely an issue. But Jalen Carter here at number 1, I get it. Before we get back to the video, I should mention that this video is sponsored by Raycon and the Everyday Earbuds. Raycon is a company co-founded by Ray J, and his mission to bring you premium earbuds at half the price of other premium brands. They look so sleek. I don't have them pushed all the way in because of their noise suppression. I won't be able to talk right. But they look so sleek when they're pushed all the way, and they feel and sound amazing. And with optimized gel tips for a perfect in-ear fit, these things are not going anywhere. They're going to pass every shake test. You can go for a run, work out, hang upside down, get hit stick by a linebacker. It doesn't matter. These things are not going anywhere. 8 hours of playtime and a 32-hour battery life. They're going to be ready whenever you need them, ready to go. And with 3 sound profiles to customize your listening experience with pure sound, balanced sound, and bass sound to boost that bass. It's a really cool feature as well. And not to mention wireless charging, which is extremely unique for earbuds in my experience. So save some money, but also still get that premium look, feel, and sound with Raycon Everyday Earbuds. Click the link in the description. That's buyraycon.com/Bengal. You'll get up to 15% off your order. That's buyraycon.com/Bengal for 15% off. Thank you to Raycon for sponsoring the video. The Bears probably do look to trade out of this, but if they can't, maybe you stick and pick and take who could be the best player in the draft. I like Will Anderson quite a bit, but a difference maker on the interior is a little bit tougher to find than a difference maker on the edge. I've talked about that in a lot of my mock drafts up to this point. Houston Texans at number 2 go Bryce Young out of Alabama. Again, I think he's one of the best players in the entire draft. He is my QB1. It's tough to rate anyone over him for me because Will Levis is projection, and he's a bit of an older quarterback prospect anyway. CJ Stroud has only recently shown more of a playmaking ability outside of the construct of the play. So I do worry about that a little bit as well. But anytime you go up against number one defense in the nation in Georgia and perform extraordinarily well like CJ Stroud did, I think that raises some eyebrows a bit in a good way, because maybe you see what CJ Stroud could potentially become if he uses his mobility and athleticism more than he's shown over the course of his career up to this point. But yeah, the Texans could definitely take Bryce Young. Really good player, but we know situation is everything for quarterback development. So we'll see what Bryce Young can become in Houston if this were to happen. Will Anderson, the Cardinals. Man, the Cardinals were as disappointing or even more than I thought they'd be. I didn't think they were going to be good coming into the year, but did not expect them to hold the number 3 overall pick in the draft. J.J. Watt's retired. You need help on the edge on the defensive line. Anyway, Will Anderson Jr. is quite a player that you want to stick and pick with. He'd be a tough player to pass on. With Carter off the board, maybe a team's looking to trade up for a quarterback somewhere in this range that could change things. But I don't know if the Cardinals are going to be one of those teams looking to move down. They do need help on the edge, on offensive side of the ball as well, at tackle. Could potentially take things on the interior as well. The interior, I would say, is a little bit worse than tackle is, but could definitely look to take tackle, corner. So maybe they move down, but sticking and picking, I think, also makes a ton of sense. Will Levis to the Colts. Everyone knows Chris Ballard is a big trait and upside guy, so Will Levis seems like somebody he would be in on. The Colts need a quarterback. Will Levis is going to go high in the draft. That's what we just have to accept at this point. I still don't fully understand how Will Levis can be an automatic surefire, like top 5 guy in every mock draft. But Anthony Richardson, who is younger, bigger, more athletic, stronger arm, who's also a lot of projection, how is that guy not getting top 5 or top 10 hype? I know it hasn't all been there on tape, only 1 year starting. Got better as the year went on. Did not have a lot to work with the Florida Gator offense. So I don't know. I like Anthony Richardson. I get that he's going to be a long shot to be a big star NFL quarterback, but it's hard not to bet on the traits and the upside. And if you're going to, why take the older, less athletic quarterback? I mean, Will Levis is a good athlete with a big arm, but not Anthony Richardson. I don't know. I know Richardson he's got a long way to go, but yeah, Will Levis to the Colts at 4 makes sense, betting on the upside. And then the Seattle Seahawks at 5. I think they could go a number of directions with this pick in terms of defensive line. Tyree Wilson makes sense. Super, long pass rusher. I know Kyle Yates on Twitter tweeted out about his arm length being only an inch less in terms of wingspan to Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's nearly 7 feet tall, the Greek freak, super long arms, and Tyree Wilson is right in that same range, although admittedly not quite as tall as Giannis, thankfully. But really good athlete. I think he will go high. We've had him high in mock drafts for a while. It makes sense. Also very productive. It is the Big 12, but he's been a very good player. I like Tyree Wilson quite a bit. We'll have to see how he develops. But this is the first big surprise. CB1 off the board is Illinois corner Devin Witherspoon. I like Witherspoon a lot too, so it's kind of nice to see him rise up a lot. I don't think he's quite as good of an athlete as Christian Gonzalez is, so that's why I've had Gonzalez ranked a bit higher. But, Witherspoon is a really, really good player and was a big part of why Illinois' defense was so good this year. They had a couple of really good DBs, but Witherspoon certainly the best of the bunch. The Lions certainly could afford to bring in a new corner. Okuda was up and down this past season. I don't know if they have anybody under contract for 2023. So this makes a ton of sense. Although the counterpoint to this is with a player like Myles Murphy still on the board, for example, and Brian Brzee, and we'll get to him later. Would you opt to take a corner at this spot in a great cornerback class? Although you'd get your CB1 if this is who that is. And it's a talented edge class too, but I don't know, a little bit more valuable to take a defensive lineman than it is to take a corner. But I don't know how you can disagree with that. Anytime you can get your favorite best prospect at a position, it's tough to pass up on that after, Tyree Wilson and Will Anderson are both gone, but I still love Myles Murphy a lot. Peter Skoronski for the Raiders. He is probably, the best offensive lineman in the class, has short arms. We've said all of these things for months now, but is just a really good player. The thing is, if the Raiders are in such a big need for a quarterback, not bringing back Derek Carr, I don't know if you believe in Jarrett Stidham or not. It would be a stretch to say that you should believe in him. But CJ Stroud's still on the board. The Raiders need a quarterback. Yes, it would be QB3 at this point off the board. But do you really take an offensive tackle, who is a great one, albeit, but do you take an offensive tackle over that quarterback? This is kind of where I'd be a little bit surprised to see the Raiders do that if CJ Stroud was on the board. So that's one that, we'll have to see how that plays out. And then a big surprise here, but a great one. I've tweeted about Lucas Van Ness a little bit out of Iowa. It was initially reported that he was going back to Iowa. However, he declared maybe a week or so ago, maybe a day or so before the deadline. That might have been even 2 weeks at this point. No, it was about a week ago, right? I can't remember. Something in that range. Lucas Van Ness is a really, really fun defensive lineman. Didn't exactly play every down for Iowa, but you could tell he was the best player on the field when he was in. To see him go top 10 is a bit of a surprise, but he's a really good athlete with great power. This is like your power edge rusher, defensive lineman, bull rush, long arm. Lucas Van Ness is a really, really fun defensive lineman. And the Falcons could really, really use help on the defensive line. Lucas Van Ness, you brought in Arnold Ebiketie last year. I think this could end up being a pretty good defensive line. You just got to continue to hit on picks and develop, obviously. Panthers at 9 would go CJ Stroud, which, yeah, if CJ Stroud is available, it's kind of a no-brainer. I think the Panthers probably have to take a quarterback. I think there is a scenario where maybe the Raiders go QB, and then they have to think about taking Anthony Richardson at 9, which could certainly be a stretch. Richardson is not even a surefire first-round pick, but in the event that CJ Stroud is still on the board, this would obviously make a ton of sense. I don't care how good Sam Darnold was at the back end of the year. I think we know who Sam Darnold is to this point. You can't bet on him, and taking CJ Stroud at 9, I think, is a pretty good value for potentially some teams' QB1 in the draft. Number 10, Myles Murphy. Yeah, Howie Roseman loves his defensive lineman. Myles Murphy is a versatile defensive lineman, probably your typical 4-3 starting defensive end, but can move inside and outside. I think he's scheme versatile, so I don't really think it matters a ton. Good fit for the Eagles regardless, so I really wouldn't worry about it too much. They've got some great defensive linemen there right now, but some are aging, some contracts are expiring. I would not be surprised if the Eagles take defensive line with their first-round pick. Could also choose to get, a big speed rusher potentially down the board. Maybe it's Nolan Smith who's available. Maybe it's BJ Ojulari who's quite good, and take a corner at number 10 depending who's available. But Myles Murphy certainly makes sense. And then at 11, we have the Titans taking Paris Johnson Jr. from Ohio State. DJ writes that he needs to get stronger and play with better knee bend, but he has ideal size, length, foot quickness. The Titans need to get younger, healthier, and more athletic up front. I've been mocking offensive line to them for a while now. I know all the Titans fans want a receiver. The offensive line has to get better in terms of pass blocking. You don't have time for any of these receivers to get open or being able to throw it to them because their offensive line, from a pass blocking standpoint, is not where you want it to be. Paris Johnson Jr. could certainly help with that. So I still think offensive tackle makes a ton of sense for the Titans. You could sell me on receiver as well, maybe even quarterback, depending on who's available. Maybe the QBs fall and the Titans have a chance to take one. But I think that's kind of a bit more of a long shot. At number 12, we have another corner. This is CB2 off the board in Joey Porter Jr. Son, obviously, of Joey Porter. It would kind of surprise me to see the Texans, with no longer Lovie Smith there as well, take another corner this high in the draft. They do have multiple first-round picks, obviously, so you have a little bit more flexibility with this second one if you go quarterback at number 2. But there's a lot of talent on the board. Edge rusher, still such a big need here for the Texans. It's a talented edge class, so you could potentially look to take one at the top of the second round. However, I think it'd be tough to pass on some of these edge players here at number 12. Maybe if you're the Texans, you even look to move up. But with the talent on their roster as a whole, that would kind of surprise me. I think they just got to take more swings and hope you hit on them rather than, trading up and losing out on some of those picks that could be so valuable. But yeah, this is a really good corner class. You're going to see this term thrown out a lot with length because a lot of these corners have really long arms. They're big bodies. When you look at Joey Porter Jr. and you look at, Cam Smith, and you look at even Devin Witherspoon is a fairly big corner, even though he's maybe about 6 foot compared to Joey Porter Jr., who's 6'1" with longer arms. But think about Sauce Gardner and J.C. Horn. No one's really going to be as big or as fluid as Sauce Gardner or even as big as Tariq Woolen. But these are some big corners. They're your prototype style of CB. 6 foot plus with long arms that can really help you impress coverage. So it would not surprise me to see Joey Porter go in this range. I just question if the Texans would take a corner with this number 12 pick. Yeah, it could be receiver. We've talked about on this channel a lot how this isn't a great receiver class. There's some good depth, but there's not so much of that top-end talent. So where does Quentin Johnson go? Where does Jordan Addison go? Where does Jackson Smith and Jigba go? These guys are not surefire locks to go top 15, top 20, top 25 even. So we'll talk about that more as we go through here. Jets taking Broderick Jones. I've given them tackle every time. It's got to be a tackle for the Jets. It has to be, I think. But a lot of the times when we get to the Jets, the top tackles are already off the board. In this instance where they can get, again, a player that could be offensive tackle 1 on some teams' boards, this is fantastic. Young player and someone that has been a force for Georgia. Could be a really, really good pick for the Jets here. Patriots go Brian Branch at 14. They love their nickel-type player, and that's what Brian Branch is. I don't know if the Patriots are looking for more help there. I feel like they've done pretty well recently. And when you look at like Jack Jones, for example, I feel like they have a lot of players that can fit into that nickel role. Do you take one at 14? Yes, maybe you move Brian Branch to free safety. He's your Devin McCourty replacement long-term. Kind of look what the Bengals did with Dax Hill this past season, looking to replace Jesse Bates, although he's admittedly not as old as Devin McCourty, but with an expiring contract. It wouldn't entirely shock me, but, we know the Patriots love to take DBs kind of back end of round 1, round 2, especially with size. So I'm trying to think of Bill Belichick's draft history, and they really haven't had a huge, a positional value type focus inside the first round. They kind of just take whatever player they want. So they're a little bit tougher to predict. But Brian Branch is really, really good. For that reason, it's hard to disagree here. But I would be surprised to see the Patriots go with who's probably a nickel corner at number 14. I would just be a little bit surprised. Not impossible, but I'd expect them more to go maybe with a true boundary, and there are some really good ones in this class if they want to go that direction. Nolan Smith to the Packers here at 15. Nolan Smith is a weird one to me because of his injury. We really haven't seen a whole lot of him. He was someone going into the year that I felt needed to develop more as a pass rusher, and then we didn't really get to see him this year. So, yeah, former 5-star recruit to Georgia, freak athlete. I'm not sure he's going to go this high. It would surprise me a little bit, especially coming off injury. But I guess it's not impossible. It's at 15. The Packers could definitely look to solidify their defensive line. And, they play in a 3-4. So an edge rusher, 3-4 outside linebacker, and Nolan Smith does make sense. Wouldn't surprise me. Although I think it wouldn't surprise me either to see another name get called, even if it's at the same position. But it's January 20th. It's really tough to say who's going to go where at this point. Commanders going Christian Gonzalez. He's been my CB1 up to this point. One of the guys that I've really watched more of than any other corner in the class. Corner is really one of these positions I've looked at more than any other. And it's just a fun cornerback class. The Giants are a team, my favorite team, who's probably going to be in on a corner depending on who gets there. So I've looked at a lot of these guys. Christian Gonzalez, Joey Porter Jr. is one that I've checked out. Only a little bit of the top guys, but love Devin Witherspoon. I just think there's great value, especially down the board. I'm going to spoil it right now, but Clark Phillips is not a name you're going to see go in the first round of this mock draft, but he's another really good player, just a bit undersized, kind of one of these probable nickel guys in the NFL. But there are a lot of good corners. I really like Christian Gonzalez, and I think he still could be CB1 off the board. Here he goes, middle of the first round. It's good value for the Commanders who desperately need help at the position, but yeah, we'll have to see what happens. I think the Steelers are another one of those teams that could potentially look to take a corner even after trading for William Jackson. In this instance, they go Osiris Torrance, the probable interior offensive lineman 1, played right guard for Florida. He's a really, really good run blocking offensive lineman. You have Najee Harris. Develop an identity on offense. Osiris Torrance helps you do that. They have James Daniels, but I'm not sure the rest of that interior is solidified. You could potentially look to take a center. That would not be Osiris Torrance. That would be more John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota, potentially down the board, maybe somewhere in the second. But the Steelers, for a while now, have needed to address their offensive line. They tried to do it in free agency a little bit. Didn't really work out a ton. Mason Cole is never really going to be a top flight interior offensive lineman. So maybe try and swing and hit one in the draft. Lions, with their second pick, Trenton Simpson from Clemson. I love Trenton Simpson. I know linebacker's not especially valuable. It's like running back on defense in a way. But man, it feels like a guy who can do a bunch of different things at a high level. Should be a tremendously valuable player. And that's what Trenton Simpson is to me. And for the Lions that just need to get better on defense in general, it's hard to argue with taking the best linebacker probably in this draft. And not necessarily your Mike, but someone that can move around, play that overhang role, similarly to another Clemson linebacker in Isaiah Simmons. Simpson is more linebacker, whereas I think Isaiah Simmons was a little bit more DB. Should be a really, really good player in the NFL. Someone that I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. Really good athlete. And with how well Malcolm Rodrigo played for the Lions this past season as a rookie, got a lot of potential there. Another really good athlete, Malcolm Rodriguez is. So you could really form a formidable duo. So don't dislike it at all. Emmanuel Forbes at 19 is another interesting one. I'm going to keep using that word throughout the course of this, and we'll have another interesting pick here in a minute. But Emmanuel Forbes is someone I've had in the first round, maybe every other mock draft that I do, or every few, because I think he's kind of a fringe guy. Once you get to this point in the draft, though, you are talking a lot about fringe players. It's hard to know if these guys will end up being first-round picks. Forbes is another guy who has fairly long arms, or at least looks long on tape. 6 foot 180, bit of a skinnier corner. But yeah, another ball hawk. Really interesting player. The Bucks could certainly use more depth at corner at the very least. I think Jamel Dean's contract is expiring. I think you really only have Carlton Davis under contract long-term. Sean Murphy-Bunting's a big question mark. So CB is something they could definitely target inside the first round. Forbes, is he better than some of the cornerbacks who don't go in the first round of this mock draft? I guess it kind of depends on what you're looking for. He's a fun player, but this is a bit of a surprise to me here at number 19. And another surprise is Will McDonald. I liked him. I thought he was going to enter the last draft. So I did research and a tape study on him a year ago. And I liked Will McDonald. Really good burst off the line. Didn't really show that he can be an every down defensive end, in my opinion. Now, is he someone that's going to set a mean edge for you? I'm not sure he's that guy. So in a 3-4 defense, I think he would be a fairly good fit, but I'm not sure his athleticism in space is going to be someone that you'd absolutely love playing in that system. But yeah, with Uchenna Nwosu and taking Tyree Wilson at the top here, they would be really establishing a formidable defensive line with a bunch of really fun edge rushers that, maybe you get all three of those guys on the field at once. Will McDonald off the edge, Uchenna Nwosu off the edge, Tyree Wilson sliding inside. Maybe you don't know who's coming on the blitz. Maybe you back Uchenna Nwosu into space. They could do a bunch of different things. But again, similarly to the way that we talked about earlier with the Texans, I would be surprised to see the Seahawks go with 2 edge rushers here back to back. It's just usually something you don't see happen very much with teams with multiple first-round picks. Although they do need edge badly. So to double dip and take 2 that you're really comfortable with, yeah, I don't hate the philosophy on that at all. But Will McDonald, seeing him go in the first round, that would be, or at least is, a bit of a surprise at this point. As is the next pick. DJ is a Chargers guy and notices a big need at tight end. For sure. I think I've had Darnell Washington there a couple of times. Who's another guy not in the first round, which is not super surprising. But Dalton Kincaid from Utah, really, really good tight end. We talked a lot about how this is a really good tight end class with Dalton Kincaid from Utah and with Michael Mayer from Notre Dame, Darnell Washington from Georgia, and then you have, South Dakota State in Tucker Kraft. You have Oregon State. You have Sam Laporta. I mean, there are from Iowa State, right? But you got or Iowa, excuse me. But you got some really, really good players. Luke Musgrave is Oregon State, by the way. I think I forgot to mention him. You got some really good tight ends. So I wonder where the actual first domino will fall. DJ's got Dalton Kincaid as the first tight end off the board, which would be a little bit of a surprise up to this point. But he's really, really good. This is a really good tight end class. This could be a domino effect where one goes and then they all start to go. I don't know if they're all going to be first-round picks. I'm not sure if Kincaid's going to be a first-rounder. Not sure if Mayer's going to be a first-rounder. Or Tucker Kraft, of course. Or Luke Musgrave. You get it, right? But I think all of these guys, I think you're going to see a run in round 2, maybe into round 3. I think you're going to see maybe 5 tight ends go before the 70th pick, if I had to make a guess. I think they're all really, really good. And another huge surprise, Anthony Richardson to the Baltimore Ravens at 22. This is when I saw him getting flamed on. He does mention that John Harbaugh said that, and I saw the quote as well. It's like 100%, 200%. Lamar Jackson is our quarterback. We built our offense around him. He's our quarterback. But they have not signed him to a contract. And in the event that you cannot work out a long-term extension, Anthony Richardson can, I don't want to say be a plug-and-play player because he's got a little bit of a ways to go. But in terms of finding a QB with this type of Lamar Jackson athleticism, it's impossible to find that. But Anthony Richardson's going to be pretty close. He's got a bigger arm than Lamar Jackson has without as top-end speed and elusiveness. But Richardson's more of a truck where Lamar Jackson's more of a Ferrari, if that makes sense. But Anthony Richardson, he's one of these trucks that can get going. He's a fast player. So you can still run, read option and especially QB power, QB blast with Anthony Richardson. I know Greg Roman's not going to be calling the plays anymore, but Anthony Richardson is someone with the athletic profile to fit into that system if you are unable to extend Lamar Jackson long term. So do you maybe want a receiver at this point? Yes. But if you can't extend Lamar Jackson, they've got to consider quarterback. So I wouldn't hate this pick at all for Baltimore. But at the same time, if the Ravens let Lamar Jackson go for nothing, delete the franchise. I mean, that would be terrible because they need a number of different positions. Receiver, quarterback, potentially, right? But corner, defensive line, even, especially off the edge, because who knows what David Ajabo is going to be. Adafe Owe was not quite as good as we expected here in year 2 based off of year 1. So there are positions that could be upgraded, certainly. Quarterback, you hope, is not going to be one of them, but you got to prepare. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best type of deal. At number 23, big surprise here. I have not seen Tyreek Stevenson in round 1 talk at all, especially above other corners I like Cam Smith, for example. But Tyreek Stevenson from Miami, another one of these big, long corners that can run. And I haven't really seen a ton of Tyreek Stevenson, but the Vikings need DB. Ed Donatel recently fired. I wouldn't be surprised to see them go corner. But to this point, I'm going to be honest, have not taken a deep dive into Tyreek Stevenson. So I really can't tell you about many of his strengths and weaknesses other than I know that he's one of these big, long corners that feature in this draft class heavily. But can't tell you how good he is because I really don't know more than just, watching the odd Miami game. So apologies for that, but it's January. I'm going to take a deep dive and really check these guys out over the next several months. So we've got a little bit of time here. Michael Mayer, first-round pick here at 24 to the Jacksonville Jaguars. This has been talked about for a while now. We've had Michael Mayer to the Jags when they were picking in the teens. Really good fit for the offense. Really good player. We've seen how tight end can thrive under Doug Peterson. Evan Ingram, could end up going somewhere else. I think he's going to stick around in Jacksonville, honestly, based off of how good this last season was. But even if you extend Evan Ingram, it's kind of even a stretch to call him a tight end. Michael Mayer is a tight end. Evan Ingram is a big slot in some ways, right? He's a big receiver. Michael Mayer could still be a really good fit, even if you bring back Evan Ingram. And I think at 24, it's not the worst idea. You know, we're so against taking running back in the first round, which I get it a lot of the time, especially up high. But as you get deeper into the draft here, take a first-round pick on a less valuable position. You get the fifth-year option, and we'll talk about running back a bit later, but I don't mind taking maybe the best tight end in the draft at 24. I really don't mind it. So hard to argue with that. And then we have the first receiver off the board. It's Jordan Addison from USC. The Giants need receiver desperately. Isaiah Hodgins has been a good player. They need receiver desperately. The reason you see the first receiver off the board here at 25 is because there is not a perfect receiver. There's not really a top-end receiver prospect in this class. Addison is the closest you'll get to one because he's an elite route runner. Has some hands problems and doesn't really play through the football with tremendous strength, so you worry about contested catch opportunities, but he gets open at an elite rate. You just worry about the hands and the play strength a little bit. But Addison's really good, but yeah, we've talked about it, and I've taken a lot of heat for it, and now we're seeing Daniel Jeremiah do it. I don't know that these receivers are going to go quite as high as you expect, and that's going to be the trend with Jackson Smith and Jigba, who I've had at the bottom of the first round in like almost every mock draft that I've done, taking heat for that one consistently. But this is the reality this year. Look back to 2019. Yes, some of those players can end up developing and being studs. So, like A.J. Brown was a second-round pick. Terry McLaurin went in the third round. Deebo Samuel was a second-round pick. DK Metcalf back into the second round. Sometimes they're just not perfect prospects, and they develop. This is one of those classes. Hollywood Brown in 2019 was the first receiver off the board here around this same range in the mid-20s for the Ravens. And then N'Keal Harry went with one of the last picks of the first round, and that was all the receivers for the first round. It's shaping up to be a very similar receiver year to 2019, so it wouldn't shock me to see Hollywood Brown and then maybe Quentin Johnston go at the back end of the first to be your N'Keal Harry type. He's not really a polished route runner, although he's decent for his size and experience, but he's a good jump ball guy. But you still have a bunch of question marks with these receivers. Dallas Cowboys at 26 go Felix Anudike-Uzomah from Kansas State. Another player I've liked for a while. It's a really good edge class. Yes, it's going to be difficult to find those top-end guys, but it's really, really deep. Felix Anudike-Uzomah is another one of these super high-ceiling guys. Really, really good athlete. He was someone that I think showed up to Kansas State at like 200 or 210 pounds, bulked up to 250 plus at this point, still keeping that same type of small player athleticism and explosiveness. Really, really fun. He's a player I like a lot. And for the Cowboys, they just need more help on the edge. Micah Parsons is great. You move him around quite a bit. DeMarcus Lawrence is getting up there in age a little bit. Couldn't bring back Randy Gregory, even though you tried. We know they want edge. It would not surprise me to see them go edge here in the first round. At 27, here's Darnell Washington, tight end, upgrading the Cincinnati Bengals offense. Yeah, he's 6'7", maybe 6'8", 270, 280. He's a massive human being. Yeah, basically another offensive lineman. Mauler in the run game, still developing as a pass catcher, but has pretty good hands for someone that's basically an offensive lineman in terms of stature. Moves pretty well. Yes, he's more geared to the run game at this point, but is unselfish. I like Darnell Washington a lot. I think he is a problem for any defense because with Darnell Washington, where maybe you'd have a pretty good blocker at tight end, maybe your linebacker is a decent matchup for him. Darnell Washington against the run-of-the-mill edge rusher or linebacker, it's going to be a problem for him. He's just too big and too strong and too fast. And it's going to open up lanes for Joe Mixon, Samaje Perine. Darnell Washington is one of my favorites because you simply will never find 6'7 plus 270, 280 that can move the way he does. You just can't. He's not, a Kyle Pitts mover in space. Don't think he's ever going to be an elite route runner for that reason, just not quite quick enough. But he's so big, so strong. And is a freak athlete too. I mean, see him hurdle over some of these players. It's ridiculous. Someone that big just can move the way he does. It's unbelievable. Broncos take B.J. Ojulari, pretty underrated player to this point. we've talked about the Broncos potentially going edge. I still see it as a bit of a strength of that defense. I think they traded Bradley Chubb because they could, and they got a first-round pick out of it. I don't know if they're going to just take another edge rusher. Certainly a possibility, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them go in another direction. This could be offensive line. But yeah, it still could be edge after trading Bradley Chubb, but I still feel like that's a strength of theirs. And this is the big one. Bijan Robinson of the Buffalo Bills. I've had this for a while. I know the Bills fans are comfortable with who you have at running back. I get it. But at the same time, Bijan Robinson is better than all of them. He is a great pass blocker. He is a fantastic receiver for a running back. It is unbelievable how good he is as a receiver. And then when you talk about him as a runner, contact balance is as good as you're going to find. Vision is very good. Patience is fantastic. He's just unbelievable. Yes, I am a Texas Longhorns fan, but I don't think it's biased. I would be saying this about him if he were on any other team. He's a fantastic player. I also love Jahmyr Gibbs from Alabama, but different running back. But Bijan is just the complete package of a 3-down running back, and we're so addicted to deleting the first name and just looking at the position and saying there's no chance. But to go first round, get the 5th-year option on that player when they are a complete difference maker, maybe a top 10 player in the entire class, worthy of a top 10 pick as a running back, which is rare. For someone that can be an effective blocker, that can be an incredible receiver, and obviously a really good runner, how do you discount the value of that at the back end of the first round? Are you complaining if it's number 40, if it's 10 picks down the board? But that's the difference between being able to take Bijan Robinson and not taking him. I don't know, man. Like, I understand not wanting to extend running backs because it gets pretty expensive, but to get just the associated value at number 29, which is very, very cheap, and I know it only scales down, but it's cheap. Signing bonus is not immense compared to other first-round picks, obviously. I don't know, man. Your 5th-year option, you get a running back. Let's say you draft him age 21, age 22. 5 seasons, you get him through his prime, and then you don't even have to extend them, but you get a 4 or 5-year window of a really, really great potential game changer at the position. We're undervaluing running back too much to this point. I know the analytics say this and that. I know it's a replaceable position. You're not finding Bijan Robinson in the 4th round. It's a rarity. The closest we've seen recently is Alvin Kamara that can really do it all. And he only went in the 3rd round because we really just hadn't seen enough of it. He was an Alabama transfer that went to Tennessee and just didn't really play a ton. Bijan Robinson, man, we've seen it. Everyone knows about him. He's going to be a first-round pick, surely. I'd be surprised to see him not. And this is the huge surprise here. But Daniel Jeremiah says that teams are split on Brzee. 6'5", 305, quickness, toughness, but stiffness and injury history. Which, how are you defining toughness versus injury history? Just playing through it? I know he has done that, so probably so. But Brzee's really good. I don't know. I've had him in the top 10, and I hesitate to get away from that just because I view him as the best interior defensive line pass rush type in this draft next to Jalen Carter. Like beyond Jalen Carter, Brzee is the next best one, and he's good. I don't know if he's going to last to 30, but with injury history, yeah, that drops him down a peg. That's the same thing I was talking about with Nolan Smith. So I don't know. Brzee is a weird one because I think the player is really, really good, but I guess where does he end up going? DJ thinks at number 30 or potentially back end of the first round. We'll have to see. I like Brzee, but yeah, certainly some question marks with him as well. And then the last pick of the first round is Jackson Smith and Jigba to the Eagles. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, upgrade over Quez Watkins in Jackson Smith and Jigba. We've talked about it for a while. Injury history, probably just a slot receiver, but a very, very good one. I like JSN. I just know combination of injury history, probable slot designation, plus don't know if he's going to test all that well. doesn't really have the makings of a surefire top-end first-round pick. And that's the reason I've had him down at the bottom of the first round in pretty much every mock draft I've done. However, you got to think about it. There are a number of players that we kind of expected to see go first round here that we've been seeing go first round, that I've been having in the first round, that have not gone first round. Cam Smith, Quentin Johnston, obviously. They have their question marks, but this is the mock draft. I'd be interested to pick DJ's brain and, kind of see. It's not going to be anything too crazy. It's, Quentin Johnston, we kind of know why he would be out of the first round. Cam Smith, it's just a deep cornerback class. Clark Phillips is small. These things happen. Not every first-round talent can be a first-rounder, and not everyone that appears to be a first-round talent is a first-round talent. So it's a good draft. Should be a really, really fun draft. We're a while away, but that is the mock draft. Shout out to DJ. Check him out on Twitter, @MoveTheSticks. Has more of a deep dive on all of these picks. So check it out, and thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.